Hello there, everyone, and welcome back to the GSL-English Podcast. My name is Gideon, and this is a podcast for all learners of English to improve in a relaxed and natural way. And in this episode, we are going to dive into some very British vocabulary and expressions. So we're going to break down some of the points that you've raised with me. Sometimes I use certain expressions, certain words, certain phrasal verbs that, I'll be honest, I don't know I've even used. And then you'll leave a comment, rightly so, saying, what does that mean? You said this. What does it mean? I've had a few emails asking, Gideon, you said this. What do you mean? So I'm going to go through some of those today. Some of the questions you've raised from things that I've said on the podcast, but also questions raised from some of my private students. Because, as I said in the introduction, the purpose of this podcast is to present the English language to you in a real, natural, and authentic way. So I don't script it word for word. I have notes, but I try to just let the English language come out naturally. And because of that approach, sometimes I use very localized expressions here to the southeast of England, and I understand that they just don't make sense. So we're going to answer some of your questions today and also carry on doing that. If I use an expression that you just don't quite understand, you've never heard before, let me know in the comments. Send me an email, GSL-English1@gmail.com, and I'll get back to you, hopefully. I'm just going to put a hopefully in there. I will try my best to get back to you. If not, I'll answer it on future episodes. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to explain some of the expressions that I've used recently. And also, what I've done is I've compiled just a little list of real life words and expressions that I've had to use in my own life, or that are based around situations that I've been through recently. So if you find yourself in a similar situation, you'll be prepared to answer them or talk about them in the most British way possible. So there you go. This episode is mostly, focused on vocabulary. To be honest, it's completely focused on vocabulary and expression. So if you want something else, you might not get it today. That's what we're going to stick with. But before we get started, if you are new here, please don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode of this podcast. I'm always chatting about language, culture, and I try to include all the things that make British English unique, and we read interesting stories and articles together. So just go on, give it a subscribe. What have you got to lose? And if you are listening on Spotify, follow. I think that's what you do on Spotify. Do you follow a podcast? Do you subscribe? I'm not too sure, but do whatever you need to do to support this podcast if you are listening on Spotify. So I hope you are all doing well. I hope you're all right. I hope you've had a good week. This is going out on a Sunday morning, so I do hope that you get to watch this in a relaxed environment, to try and absorb the English. Oh dear. To try and absorb the English language in a comfortable way. Just as a note, as you can tell, I'm recording this episode quite late at night on a Friday. As you can tell by that little slither of my window there, if you're watching on YouTube, it's dark outside. And I have put off doing this podcast all day. Not because I didn't want to do it, but I was just being lazy. I've had a very, very lazy day. It's just not intentionally. I had absolutely, I had loads of things that I needed to accomplish today. Have I done any of them? No. But tomorrow's a new day. But I promise myself I set myself the goal of getting the podcast recorded this evening. So let's do it. We'll go through it together, but bear with me. It's late on a Friday night. Okay, so yeah, grab a cup of tea, grab a cup of coffee, and just enjoy this one. So we're going to start with something that I spoke about from the episode. I'm so terrible at doing this. I can never remember when episodes were. I did an episode on cozy films. Was that last week? I think it was like a relaxed British English episode. Yeah, I think it was last Wednesday. I can't remember. Yeah, did an episode on cozy films and what makes a cozy film cozy. Check it out if you haven't done so already. Now, I mentioned that one of my favourite cozy films, or to be honest, one of my favourite films of all time is Star Wars. And I said that I was going to, or I used to, or I think I was talking about spending time with my family, that we would chuck Star Wars on. I mentioned that I would chuck Star Wars on with my family. And some of you asked, what does chuck mean in this context? Okay, so how can you chuck a film on? Chuck Star Wars on? Well, according to the Cambridge Dictionary, chuck has a few meanings. So generally when we speak about chucking something, it's a verb, which means to throw something carelessly. If you chuck something over there, for example, if I was to take this pen and I just chucked it over the room, I'm doing it carelessly, not with a precise aim or with the goal of not breaking it. No, it's aimlessly. Chuck it over there. So that's what we mean. No, to chuck is to throw something carelessly. But of course, that doesn't apply to chucking Star Wars on. So that's not the definition we're looking at. It's also a friendly term that is used up north in the UK. Apparently, my wife is from the north. She's from Manchester, and she did agree that amongst perhaps older generations, they do say, "You're all right, Chuck." That's my northern impression. "You're all right, Chuck." My wife's going to kill me if she watches this back for doing a northern impression. She says my northern impression is absolutely terrible. So I do apologise for that. Maybe I should insert a little clip of my wife saying it. I'll be honest with you, that's not going to happen because I don't know how to do that. But it's a great idea, isn't it? Yeah, it's not going to happen. But yeah, so up north, all right, Chuck, which is basically just a casual way of greeting someone, kind of like saying mate or something like that. You're all right, Chuck. Yeah. But in this case, of course, that doesn't apply. So what did it mean when I said I chuck Star Wars on? Well, basically what we do is we replace the verb to put with chuck. So rather than put the film on, it's just a really casual, informal way of saying we're going to do that. So rather than saying put Star Wars on, I used to put Star Wars on with my family, or we would watch Star Wars with my family, I chuck it on. At that time, it was chucking the video into the video player. That's how old I am. And then I remember getting the DVDs, and then we'd chuck the DVD on. So you can use chuck like this when you're being informal, whether it's to put a film on. Go on, let's chuck a film on. Nice relaxed Friday evening. Let's chuck a film on. Or perhaps it's a little bit cold. Oh, let's chuck the heating on. Let's put the heating on. Or even, just tossing something to one side. Chuck that over there. It's just all about being relaxed, and chuck is a great term for doing that. I used this actually yesterday. I was with my father, and he said, "Go on, Gid, chuck the kettle on." Chuck the kettle on. So yeah, basically, just another word for put. So that is what I meant. When I said I like to chuck Star Wars on with my family, just put Star Wars on to watch it. But it's a great alternative to put. Give it a try. So the next expression that was raised by one of my students because of something that we were talking about, I can't quite remember what it was, but I remember saying that I was none the wiser. After researching something, after looking into it, I was none the wiser. And if we are none the wiser, basically, we haven't learnt anything new. We have not added to our wisdom. We're still confused. about something. For example, imagine that you got a plate of biscuits. Okay, it's your plate of biscuits and you have one biscuit left. And try and picture your favourite biscuit. Mine is a chocolate hobnob. Love them. A chocolate hobnob. The best biscuit going. Imagine that you leave one biscuit on your plate that you're going to come back to. So maybe, I don't know, you go to the bathroom, you have a little break, whatever it is. You come back and somebody has stolen your biscuit. You could say, I've been trying to find out who stole my biscuit for the last hour, but I'm still none the wiser. I know that's a bit of a strange example, but biscuits are a serious thing. You know, you don't mess with someone's biscuits. And how dare you steal someone's biscuit? So, you know, if someone stole my last biscuit at a family gathering, I would be finding out who it was. Was it grandma? Was it granddad? Mum, dad? I don't know. But we're going to find out who it was. But imagine you've been trying to find out for the last hour. You haven't got any more information. You don't know who's done it. You've not learned anything new. You're still confused at who stole your last biscuit. You're none the wiser. There you go. Another one. And this is a good question. Not used too much now. But I'm a fan of bringing these perhaps older expressions back in. And I asked this to a younger friend of mine the other day. We were working on some things together. And I said to him, are you winning? Are you winning? And he said, what? What are you talking about? Am I winning? And I realized that actually this expression has not gone through the generations, so to speak. I don't know. Maybe it's just where I'm from. But basically, when we say, are you winning? Particularly when someone is performing a task, doing some work, you're basically checking, how's it going? Are you progressing how you would have liked to? Is it going how you wanted it to? Are you winning? Whether that's at work, or perhaps you've got one of your children doing homework, you know, are you winning? Is it going well? In this sense, I guess it's kind of like, are you winning the task? Are you completing it? Are you getting through it how you wanted to? I love using it as a question. I used it the other day. I can't remember who it was with. I can't remember. It was on the phone to someone. They were talking about work they were doing. And I said, are you winning? Is it going all right? Great question to use. Okay, the next word is an interesting one. This was again raised by one of my private students. The word proper. Now we're going to talk about this word proper because it's used a lot in British English. It can have different meanings depending on context and situation. So we're going to look at 4 meanings, with the latter being the kind of informal British expression that we're going to focus on. Okay, so the first meaning of proper is if something is correct or appropriate. So perhaps when somebody's exercising, particularly with an exercise like squats or deadlifts, you have to use proper form, correct form, which is your body being in a certain position and moving in a certain way so that, one, you do the exercise correctly and you prevent injury. Correct form. Or I don't know if you've ever been to a fancy restaurant and they've got about 1,000 knives and forks and spoons. You have the proper cutlery for the dish that is coming. I never know which one to use. Every time I go to a restaurant, I just take a guess. Is it outside in or is it inside out? I don't think anyone really knows. You just have a guess and see how you go with it. But there is a proper order. There is a proper fork, for example, that should be used for salad, perhaps. Again, I don't know. I do know that there's a proper knife for fish, the correct or appropriate one to use. We can also use it when you talk about something being real or genuine. For example, if I was to say, that was a proper British cup of tea. That was a proper British cup of tea. Maybe you said, hey, Gid, come over for a cup of tea. I would happily come. You made me a cup of tea and I said, thank you. That's a proper British cup of tea. It's authentic. It's genuine. It's none of that weak stuff. Got the perfect amount of milk. It's a proper British cup of tea. It's authentic. It's the real deal. It can also, this is a bit more informal, but apply to when something is full or substantial. For example, perhaps someone offers you a proper meal. They mean something hearty, something filling, a proper meal, a real meal, like a massive roast dinner or a fantastic steak and ale pie. A proper meal. It's full. It's substantial. But the situation that I used it, or that we were looking at, was when we use it casually for emphasis. For example, maybe you have a good night out with some friends and you spend the whole night laughing, and the next day you're reminiscing, talking about the evening, and you say, that was a proper laugh. That was a proper good evening. You're adding emphasis rather than saying that was a fun night. That was a proper fun night. Adding emphasis. And it's just a really great way of emphasizing the point that you're trying to make. And that was the context that, I was looking at in that class. So that was a proper good laugh. Or perhaps you watch a film. That was a proper scary film, particularly if the film is a scary one, of course. That was a proper scary film. We use it to add emphasis. So yeah, just some expressions that were raised either in the comments from podcast episodes or by students. So we looked at proper, are you winning, none the wiser, and to chuck a film on. Just on that chuck, something that came to my mind when we were recording that, or when we were just going through that a second ago, was, I don't know if you know the tongue twister. How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? I don't know how I know that, because I've not got that written down in my notes, but it just came to my mind and I wanted to talk about it. Great little tongue twister to give a try. Okay? How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? If I don't put it on the screen, it will be in the description below. Okay? And if I forget to put it in the description below, send me a comment or leave a comment and say, Gideon, you didn't put the tongue twister in the comment below, and I will do. So how much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? Give it a try. Hopefully, if I've remembered, that is written down in the description below. Now, as I mentioned recently, I'm not looking for sympathy here at all, but I had a cold recently. My wife and I, we both had colds, so thank you for your sympathy. And I was thinking about vocabulary for being under the weather, because that's sometimes the most difficult thing to explain. And my wife and I, we realised this. That actually, when you say, how are you feeling? Sometimes it's quite difficult to explain exactly how you are feeling. And then I thought, God, if we're finding that difficult in our native language, how much more difficult must that be in your second language? So we're going to look at some expressions we can use when we're just feeling a bit under the weather. Okay? When you're battling a cold, or you've got a bit of flu, you're not feeling quite right. So the first symptom, shall we say, we're going to look at is that annoying feeling when you can't stop clearing your throat. But it's not like chesty. You could say you got a tickly throat. You got a tickle in your throat, like there's something at the back of your throat just tickling it, making it itch the whole time, that makes you want to cough. A tickly cough or a tickly throat. It's that really annoying feeling. It's not like a deep, hearty cough. It's just there the whole time and you can't get rid of it. Often it lingers after you've had a cold. It just feels like there's a constant tickle or constant scratch at the back of your throat. We describe that as a tickly cough or a tickly throat. But the opposite of that, when you get that real deep cough that is it feels like it's from your lungs and takes your whole being to go through, we call that a chesty cough. It's that deep, persistent cough that lingers for ages, and often you can tell there's something in it without getting into detail. You know what I mean? It's not just in your throat. It's coming from your chest. It is a chesty cough. And I had to really ask, because my wife, how she was feeling, because I had to go to the chemist, which is the place where you get medicine and things like that. And I wanted to get some syrup because, bless her, she had a terrible cough. And just some, cough syrup. And I was looking at 3 options. So they had tickly cough syrup, chesty cough syrup, or a combination of both. And trying to get an answer of which one do you feel your cough is was actually very difficult. So I played it safe and went for the both. Didn't work at all, by the way. It was a waste of money. But yeah, tickly throat stays in the throat, chesty cough from the chest. But what about when your nose is blocked? It's just blocked and you can't seem to clear it. It's all in your nasal area and it feels like it's in the back of your head. And it's just, you can't seem to clear your nose. It won't come out. You could say, I'm bunged up. And often that happens, when your nose is like really full like that. I'm bunged up. Or I've got a blocked nose, but I'm bunged up. Or perhaps you might hear somebody else sound like that. You could say, oh, you sound bunged up. Are you all right? You sound bunged up. Be careful who you use that to. You don't just want to say it to a stranger. It might just be their voice, unfortunately. But, if the person, they look sick, they sound sick. You can say, oh, you sound really bunged up. Are you all right? Your nose is full. It's blocked. You can't clear it. But often they start with a sore throat. A sore throat. And this is when your throat feels uncomfortable and painful. You might describe it as scratchy, raw. It feels irritated. Every time you swallow, it's like swallowing a bag of nails. You got a sore throat. So really that sore just highlights the element of pain. And one of the most common symptoms, isn't it, of when we're not feeling well or perhaps we're feeling a bit run down, often starts with a sore, S-O-R-E, throat. Or you might describe it as any other way you want to, like scratchy or raw, but generally we say it's a sore throat. Now, another term that we used was, I was talking to someone on the phone, and they said, how are you doing? I said, I've got a nasty cold. I've got a nasty cold. And I thought that was interesting. Nasty, because when we often describe someone as being nasty, they're not very nice. They're mean. They're perhaps a bully or whatever it is. So when we talk about a nasty cold, it's like it's bad. It's not very nice. It's like it's being mean to us. It makes us feel miserable. Great way to describe it in an informal situation, talking to friends or family. Come down with a nasty cold. Phrasal verb, I've come down with, or I've caught a nasty cold. And on this line, sometimes we might say that I'm feeling rough. I'm feeling rough. Or I woke up feeling rough. Feeling a bit dodgy. Or I'm feeling dodgy today. Particularly would perhaps use that if our stomach is not feeling too good. Both are very common. But these are just some expressions we can use to describe how we're feeling when we're not feeling very well. And that can sometimes be the most difficult thing to do. So, tickly throat or a chesty cough. If our nose is blocked, we're bunged up. If our throat hurts, we've got a sore throat. If our cold is bad, we could describe it as being a nasty cold. Or perhaps we're feeling rough, we're feeling dodgy, whatever it is. But after that cold, once you get through it, you get your appetite back. And my goodness, are you peckish? I don't know if this is just me, but after I've been ill, my body goes into overeating mode. I need to make up for what I've lost. So I am unbelievably peckish. If we are peckish, this is a way of saying that we're hungry. And just particularly in this instance, a little bit hungry, but getting out of the cold, peckish all the time. And particularly with the cold weather creeping in here in England, I have to admit it was absolutely beautiful today. It was really autumnal, when the leaves are like that beautiful orange and red. Beautiful, but absolutely freezing. But I don't know why. The cold weather makes me more peckish than usual. I just seem to always be peckish I always want to graze on food like a cow when I come into the winter months. But one thing I love about the colder months is they are perfect for hearty meals. And England does hearty meals in the best way. I honestly believe that. I love good English hearty meals. And when we talk about hearty meals, they are those comforting, filling dishes that warm you up. You don't need anything else afterwards. A good hearty meal. So here's a few of my favourite proper British comfort foods. The first is shepherd's pie or cottage pie. So one is minced lamb, one is and cottage pie is beef. So shepherd's pie is lamb, hence the idea of being shepherds and lamb. Cottage pie is beef. And I love a shepherd's pie. My dad makes the best shepherd's pie at winter. Doesn't cook many times a year, but that's like one of his staples. And basically, I like shepherd's pie, which is minced lamb. It's in gravy, topped with mashed potatoes, and it's baked until the top is like golden and crispy. And a good shepherd's pie is just a little bit golden, just a little bit crispy on top. And of course, in that you can have your veg, your peas, your carrots, whatever your preference is. But on a cold winter's day, there's nothing quite like having a piping hot shepherd's pie at home with the family. I absolutely love it. I never buy it at a pub though, which is interesting. If I go out, I will never buy a shepherd's pie because it's just never as good as my dad can make it. But one meal that I will buy out and I've loved all my life is bangers and mash. Bangers and mash. Bangers, of course, referring to a sausage. And this is, as it sounds, sausage served with mashed potatoes and gravy. It's a simple meal, but a classic that I absolutely love. Particularly when the gravy has got like onion in it. Just a little bit of red wine gravy, maybe with a bit of onion. Bangers and mash on a cold winter's day here in the southeast of England. Absolutely brilliant. Now, just as a disclaimer, I'm not talking about roast dinners, but I do love a roast dinner as well. So on this list, I haven't included roast dinners, but I do love them. But I've spoken about them way too much on this podcast in the past. So I restrained myself from talking about the perfect roast dinner. Another meal that I had last week is toad in the hole, but don't worry, it's not an actual toad. Toad in the hole is sausages baked in Yorkshire pudding batter served with gravy and vegetables. So basically you have sausages that are basically in the batter of a Yorkshire pudding. So a Yorkshire pudding is commonly what goes with a roast dinner, but toad in the hole, sausages kind of just flat down in with Yorkshire pudding batter. If you Google it, you'll see a picture. I like to have it with gravy on top, and then you can have some potatoes on the side or vegetables. It's just a proper hearty English meal. Absolutely love it. And one thing I remember as a kid, I wrote a little thing here on my notes, was where I grew up in England. As if you're a regular viewer or listener, you'll know I grew up in that kind of quintessential British English town. And we had a pub. So literally 1 minute down the road, we had a pub. And they used to do a meal, which was a giant Yorkshire pudding filled with meat, very often sausages or like chicken or beef. You'd have potatoes, peas, vegetables, and gravy inside. And the bottom of the Yorkshire pudding was quite thick. And as you were eating it, you kind of, basically your Yorkshire pudding acted as a bowl for the food. And it would just absorb all the perfect, gorgeous gravy. And at the end of your meal, you're kind of left with this soaked Yorkshire pudding batter full of gorgeous gravy. And I used to love it. And I remember as a kid ordering that every time. And my parents saying to me, "Hey, kid, do you want to go down the pub and have the giant Yorkshire pudding?" Well, you didn't have to ask me twice. I would be there in a heartbeat with an orange juice, which I find weird. When I was a kid, I just loved orange juice, but it's a bit strange with that meal. But hey ho, that pub was called The Rising Sun. I love that place. I actually went there recently. I wanted to take my wife back to experience where my childhood and just show her where I grew up and different things like that. But it was quite sad when I went back. I almost wish that I hadn't, because the pub has changed so much. Still good food, lovely service, but it's modernized, which of course they have to do. But to me, it had lost that charm. Like before, it had just old carpet. Everything was wooden. I don't know how to explain it really. If you've gone to just a traditional British pub, you'll know exactly the feeling. It's got a particular smell, and the atmosphere is just a certain way. And unfortunately, those pubs are becoming more and more obsolete here in England as times change, which is true. Times change, things are modernized. But I went back and it had modernized so much that I almost didn't recognize it. And so I tried to explain it to my wife, just what it was like. Yeah, great pub. The Rising Sun in a little village called Forkham, Fawkham, Forkham, right near the Brands Hatch racetrack, which got me into loving cars. So yeah, there you go. One more great meal, great pub meal, steak and ale pie. Oh, you can't go wrong with a good steak and ale pie. I absolutely love it. So there you go. I don't know if that really classes as vocabulary, that last section, but I fancy talking about food because it's getting to that time of year. So that's it for today's episode. I hope you picked up on some new British expressions and phrases that will come in handy, that you'll be able to use. If you enjoyed this style of lesson, let me know in the comments, and I'll try and present more just everyday British English vocabulary, because it's easy to Google vocabulary and you come up with, vocabulary that is commonly used. But I think the most difficult thing is to learn that vocabulary, which is not necessarily taught, but used all the time. And that's the vocabulary that I want to try and present to you. Or sometimes here in England, in the United Kingdom, we take words and we use them in a different way that's not always correct, but it's what we do. So I think if you can learn that, if I can help you to kind of understand those expressions and the way that we use certain words in their context, it'll help you to be more ready for a real life experience here in England. And that's what I want to do. So thank you so much for watching today. Thank you for joining me. I do hope you're enjoying the podcast at the moment. If you are new here, as I said, feel free to reach out with any questions, introduce yourself in the comments, send me an email, whatever. But the most important thing is that you subscribe, and it really does help out when you like these videos. So please do like them, and yeah, get involved in the comments. Say hello. Where are you from? What are you doing? Even if you comment on every video, please keep doing it. I do read them all and I try to respond to as many as possible. So thank you so much for watching, And as always, remember, just enjoy English. Find ways to enjoy it. Don't make it stressful. All right. Have a good one, guys, and I'll see you soon.